I was feeling so low. My energy levels were really extremely bad. I was stuck in a way of being that I didn't like. I was too habitual and I was operating based on fear. I spent my entire life trying to achieve things without the actual intention of aligning with the version of myself that was operating from the state of being that not only had those things but was doing and flowing in the vibration. So I was feeling lost, I had low energy, and I was in pain. This was even after my first spiritual awakening. After that situation where we had to stay indoors, and I'm not gonna name, I started feeling really bad, and I stopped playing music because I had a situation that forced me to do so. I was playing music live and we couldn't go out, and you know how it is. So I really became overwhelmed with the social media kind of aspect where you had to showcase yourself. I tried it, I couldn't make a living, I was obsessing about the wrong things, and at the same time I was trying to finish my second album, which I never did, but I'm gonna be talking about why. But this is not the main thing about this video. The main thing about this video is why I did what I did, which was spending 29 days without eating any solid foods. What led me to that and why I did it. And I want to say, I'm not saying that you should do this, but I'm gonna talk about my experience so you will have your conclusions, whether it's safe to do so, whether you need to do so. And I'm not gonna be biased here, I'm just gonna tell you what happened to me, and again, take whatever resonates. But spending 29 days without eating absolutely changed the game for me, changed my life, changed my state of being, changed the version of myself, and made me discover so many things about food, about distractions, about presence, about art, about in general, many things and synchronicities that led me here where I am today, which is such a 180 turn from that version. So I'm gonna start to place you where I was at the time. So when that thing hit and we had to stay indoors, I was sort of disoriented and started working on myself in the wrong way, because you don't work on yourself, you align with a version of yourself that is different. When you feel you're working on yourself, you're trying to change things, but it's not only habits we change, we feel that there's something wrong. So it's not about changing the habits and changing the diet and things like that without acknowledging that you don't have anything to change as your true self. You become, you embody your true self, and from there the changes happen naturally. But I wasn't feeling that way. After the pandemic, I said it, came to an end, I got a job at a bar. I wasn't drinking alcohol at all, but I started working at this place because it was the only thing that would get me out of what I was doing. There was still no live music, but slowly they were opening the bar. So I did. It was convenient, and I'm not saying it was the wrong move because it led me here where I am today. So again, you don't need to be hard on yourself when you go through things that you don't prefer. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with doing any job if you do it from a state of consciousness that you're aware of what you're doing. But I wasn't in resonance with what I was doing. So I wasn't drinking. I started working at this bar, and I had really toxic people that would work at the bar, and they were not only rude, but also the general vibe was horrible at times. Especially 2 or 3 people there. The rest were okay, and actually I had a good friend that got me that job, but then he was never there. And one thing led to the other, and I had to test some samples, and I started drinking again a bit. I never had a problem with alcohol, but I personally don't like what it does to your system, where you become unconscious. Because when you are unconscious, you let things in. And at that time, I started drinking again just to have a taste, so I could recommend things to clients. And it was a long winter too, which led me to feeling awful, because I wasn't seeing the daylight at all. I wasn't being able to see the sunset or the sunrise or any type of sun. It would be pitch black every time I go out of the bar heading to my place. So I started feeling that. I started having bad habits again, and I started having this pain, this horrible pain on my right side. It was like a stabbing, horrible sensation, and it had to do with what I was eating and the stress I was under, because I was tricking myself into saying, okay, I'm learning something here, but it was just not my environment, and that God was telling me so. It had to do with the people there, and I had to go through that. So for one of the holidays that I had there, after a few months, I traveled to Argentina. And in Argentina, I came back to the sunshine. It was winter where I live, and in Argentina it was summer. So it was a whole different story. The sun made me want to go outdoors, made me want to do the things I used to do. Of course, I wasn't working, I was out of that environment. And I discovered there that there was this idea of being able to fast longer than the usual 24, 48 hours intermittent fasting, which I have done before. But I started noticing a few things and trying a few things. And I learned there was a guided program that I did from a guy from Costa Rica. He was basically leading these groups, and there were small groups, and that's where I learned about this type of fasting that I'm going to be explaining, and what it actually gave me, what it did in general to my whole life. So this was like an awakening to what it was possible. So when I came back to where I live, I went back to the bar, and a week after, at the time everything was kind of hectic. It was a disaster. My dog was sick. Me and my wife were having to change places because there was a lot of problems with the building, so we had to go somewhere else. We had to stay at a hotel while they were making some they were repairing stuff, and they were doing modifications to the flat, so we had to go back and forth, and everything was just hectic. There wasn't any peace, and I had the awareness at the time of what was going on, but I wasn't really paying attention fully. So when I saw this possibility of doing this fasting with a group and what it would do to my health, I said, okay, I'm gonna give it a go. I never tried anything like that, but I'm gonna give it a go. So slowly I started eating less refined stuff, less sugar, less meat, less things that were processed, and I started eating naturally. So I paid in advance and I got into the group. This was mostly breath work, and it was with the breath work that you would be able to sustain such a thing as not eating for, it was originally 9 to 11 days, but I extended that to 29 days or even more. I think it was about 33, but it was the transition as well that counted. And basically, when I started that, I started noticing that when you don't eat, or when you restrict your eating, there's so much pressure and thoughts that actually you get rid of. You gain a lot of energy, mental energy back, that becomes clear for you to focus in something that is yourself, you start seeing things actually instead of going in autopilot. So I did like a week of only eating less refined stuff, only eating vegetables, and I started doing some juicing. It was celery, apple, orange, and then after a week of that, we started the program, and the program consisted in juicing, which was about I would say a liter every time you would drink, and you would drink 5 liters a day, and alkaline herbs, and a few things that would allow you to do a parasite cleanse and a detox. So at first it was, you would wake up, you would do about 45 minutes of breath work, and then you would have some of these herbs, and after a few hours you would start with your first drink of the day, and no water, but the water inside the juice, of course. And at the beginning I was a bit hesitant, and I was conditioned to think that I would need to eat, otherwise I would feel weak. And it was that fear in the beginning that made me feel weak, that made me feel angry, that made me feel sad. I was operating out of discomfort, fear, and also the unknown, fear of the unknown. I started thinking, okay, what if I collapse? What if? And all of these voices. But with the second or third session of breath work, when you start connecting with your breath, you truly start connecting with your spirit. And spirit guides you and tells you what is too much and what is not. So I began feeling full without eating. And then when the time came to drink, let's say the second liter, I was already full and I was breathing, and I became conscious of all the energy that was available to me at those times. And since I didn't need to think about what I was going to eat, I was only focusing on the breath, constantly, conscious breathing all day, every day. So I started making music again. And I think about day 3 or day 4, out of nowhere, for no reason, I went to work and they let me go without any reason. Without any reason. It just came out of the blue. And then I realized it was because of my vibration, how I was operating, because my energy was somewhere else. It just didn't fit there any longer. So instead of me resisting and worrying and wanting to quit, it was just natural. But it was a shock when they told that to me, because at the time I wasn't doing anything else and I was in the process of moving and I needed more money, and I was okay. I'm a bit lost. What should I do now? And the moment they gave me that notice, when they said, okay, you have 1 week, instead of reacting, I was able to observe. So I said, okay, give me 5 minutes. And I started walking. I did like a 5 minutes walk and I started breathing the way I was breathing, which was 3 inhalations through your nose and 3 exhalations. And I was only doing that. So every time my mind wanted to start racing, I would breathe and connect with the present moment. That gave me so much clarity that I wasn't even worried about what was gonna happen. So I came back to the bar. I said, okay, it's fine. So what are the terms? What are we gonna do? And they said, okay, you have 1 more week to work here, and then I will give you a recommendation. It's just that we don't need more personnel now. And it really didn't make any sense. Things were not adding up. So I knew it was a frequency thing. And I actually was relieved that I was not gonna do that. So I went back home. I kept on doing the breath work. And the next morning, I woke up and I couldn't stop writing. It was like something had been unleashed, and I had this power that was not mine. It was not that I was the writer doing the thing. It was just flowing through me. Just like I had felt before with some of my music, but not entirely. And then that started to happen with my music. I wrote, I think, about 100 songs in just a couple of days. And I wrote a book at that time that I never got to publish, actually, because I didn't know what to do with it. So going forward, there was this situation at work. So I stayed for about 1 more week, and every day was getting more uncomfortable because I was doing more and more shadow work at the time. So I was noticing things. Everyone was eating and drinking, and I was fasting. And it felt so off to see how some liquid would change your consciousness and the things they would do. And I know I have done that, and I'm not judging anyone who does it, but it's just, you need to be aware of how much it changes your state of being in consciousness. You can be gradually not doing it anymore. You can have a drink and still have a bit of consciousness and just leave it there. You like the taste, okay, it's fine. But when you go and go and go and go and start blacking out, it's just so strange when you see it really sober. And the last day was really hectic. There was almost gonna be a fight there, and I think I had only 2 more hours left, and all of a sudden a group of 50 people came in the bar, and I had to take care of everything. I was on my own, nobody was there, and I was, oh my God, every single emotion was being processed for me. And I had a lot of energy, a lot of clarity, but also I was dealing with all these emotions that my body needed to get rid of. I'm gonna check in the camera. So when I finished with that group, which was really intense, I had to clean up the bar and just leave everything tidy. And that was actually not my last day, but I have one more day to go. And the reason I'm telling you this is because this is where it becomes a bit magical and what led me to this moment. So people left, I had to clean up. Then I think it was the next morning, they had people cleaning as well. There was everything had to be in perfect condition. And I believe there was one day where they changed everything around and they cleaned, and I was the only one during the night shift, and I made sure there was nothing else there. So I did my breath work. I came back to the bar. Remember, everything was clean, there was nobody there, and I found a blue lapis lazuli stone there. Nobody was there. I was the one looking, and I was the one entering. The place had been like the floor has been swapped. I don't know the word for that anyway. And there it was, blue lapis lazuli that came out of the blue, and I still have it. And a few weeks back, I made a video with that stone, and I kept it with me. And that stone was the one that helped me to open my throat chakra. I am a singer, I am a musician, if you want to label what I do, but there was nothing as powerful as having my throat chakra open by resonance with that stone. And I'm gonna explain why that happened and how and what I mean by this. But there was something different. So last day at the bar, I grabbed that stone, I went to my place, I had it. There was no way that anybody would have put that there. It was just on the floor in the corner where I had already cleaned before. It was just there. It was for me, it was a sign. And I kept it with me, as I was saying, and I started playing music in the streets. And I have done that in the past before for festivals and things like that. I was playing covers, not being entirely happy with what I was doing, but I said, okay, whatever. But this time, my throat chakra was open, and I had to communicate. I had to start singing more and differently. So something happened. This was like 10 days, by the way, juicing, breath work, alkaline herbs. Something happened where I had to start singing. So I grabbed the guitar, grabbed the amp, and there was still a lot of fear around the lockdown and all of that, even though the people at the bar were using the masks and things like that. It was so strange because we know that, I'm not even gonna go there. You know, if you're here, what I'm talking about. But basically, live music wasn't a thing yet, but I could go and play music on the street. So I started doing so. And something changed. There was something that clicked. I wasn't being able to sing out of habit, but everything I was singing was conscious. Still to this day, I was conscious of what I was doing. So every single note started to become a message. Every single note had an intention, but it was not controlled by my mind or my technique. It was just coming out of presence. It was flowing. And the same started happening with my guitar. So I started writing music and improvising music and changing the way I would play. I started changing keys, I started changing melodies, and it started flowing in a way that never happened before. On that first month, I made more money than I ever made at that bar, and I was just singing. Again, there was no live music, but this busking scene situation, and people would come to me and say, hey, I remember things such as, I had a really bad day today, my dog died, and your music made me realize that I was able to say goodbye from my heart, things like that. And I started receiving some gifts, donations, things like that. And I noticed that I was able to communicate from my essence, from my spirit, through music, without having to play music that I didn't want to play, without being an autopilot. And everything, the less I would think about it, the more I would be able to allow it. Because at first I would be, okay, yeah, I'm gonna be playing, and let's see how long I need to play, and let's see if I make any money. I don't know what to do. And what I would leave that voice aside. I would connect, breathe again. I would start singing, playing. When I would open my eyes, it would be full of people. And I would be able to, without words, run a show coming from spirit. And that was the day, the time, the month that my life changed forever. And that stone was the one that opened my channel. I wasn't familiar with stones at the time, with that kind of crystal stone world. Now I am, and now I use many of them, and I know that they have different energies and they amplify different things. And I believe it was around the time I was finishing this detox fasting thing that everything started clicking. I started making music again. I started writing quite a bit, and life changed radically. But the thing is, it wasn't smooth at all. It was smooth in a sense that I started doing the thing that was available to me from my heart space, which was the music. And then I discovered that the healing was part of it through music, and then through sensing energies, through sensing, my intuition opened up, and I became also a healer. I would have clients and I would help them see that they were not operating from their full potential, and they could access fifth dimensional consciousness, and from that fifth dimensional consciousness there was something different. There was something that their person, their idea, their 3D self wasn't conditioned. There was just this frequency where they could actually have clarity, and from that clarity, which I have learned from this breathwork presence and embodying that frequency with my art, I could help others do the same thing, and they would reflect that back to others as well. So there were many things that were a bit chaotic, because when you start amplifying your frequency, when you start living in a different way, the things that are no longer in resonance with that life will be destroyed or will shift one way or another, and there's no way around it, because the known, the comfortable, becomes uncomfortable. So a lot of things happened where I had to trust the unknown, where I had to trust my frequency, where I had to remain at a high frequency and not taking personal shape in order to control things. And it wasn't always smooth, but instead of reacting, every time I could, I would just operate from this space. And the more I did it, in a few years' time of the human experience, I had another revelation. And it was with those 29 days without eating that I became conscious of the things that were unconscious. I realized that I knew already, because I had my spiritual awakening before, that I'm not my thoughts, I'm not what I do. I'm not the idea I have of myself. The others are not what I project about them. But I didn't know about how embodied, or not embodied, but crystallized some emotions were in me, and how I would feel a certain way without a reason, because my body had memories from different things, different traumas, different sensations. So I had to start working towards embodying my true self, while the rest would dismantle. And breathwork, being able to be conscious of your worth by breathing, is the main revelation here. Is with the breathing, with conscious breathing, you become conscious of your patterns, your emotions, and you can acknowledge them and say, okay, thank you for being here, and with love I see you, I let it go. That was one of the most important discoveries in my work, in my life. And I was able not only to heal from that pain that I had before, but to shift to a different timeline where I wasn't suffering and struggling and doing this shadow work, but I was embodying my light being. I would pay attention to my frequency, remain there, and all of a sudden my emotions started changing. The quality of my emotions was different, because I was focused with clarity on my breath, doing what my soul wanted to do. And the more I would showcase that, the better it will become. But then many things happen where, again, when your frequency goes up, the people you relate to might change. Everything around you might change, and for the better. Not only because you resonate at a different frequency, but you also start seeing different versions of people around you. So the more you embody your light being, the more you see different aspects of everyone else in your surroundings, the more you become one with everything. So things that I discovered about not eating is that all of the weight we put on our bodies, and we put on the idea of we have to do emotional eating, the habits we have that are not nurturing, the things we do out of conditioning relating to food, the way your food affects your frequency, are just mental clutter. And we are a system inside of ourselves. That there's this digestive system, but also everything works as if it was one big system And with food and emotions, if the system is doing this, and you have an emotion crystallized, it's doing this, and it's changing everything, because to go from here to here, it would have to divert and do different things. So here it's a crystallized emotion, or here is something you ate because of fear, something you ate out of anger, something you did by habit, and it became crystallized. And that is something putting weight on you and your vibration. So when you don't eat and you realize that all of these toxins in your body, when you do something like a detox, are weighting you down, and you are able to let them go, everything starts flowing again, and there's no more resistance. So when this is disintegrated, you have all of the flow again, and that flow shows up in your energy levels, in your clarity, in your connection with and to spirit. So I'm not giving any medical advice at all here. I'm not saying you should try it, but I'm willing to give you the tools, if you're interested, of things that would change the way you operate daily, when it comes to food, when it comes to your frequency habits, when it comes to things that lower your vibration. Because if you truly are embodying the new earth, there are things that you need to be aware of, and you need to make a decision. You can still eat, of course, I do eat. That was just a detox. But you have to be aware of how eating affects your vibration. Not only because of what you eat, but the intention behind it. Are you eating something out of like a comfort food because you're scared, because you don't want to face something? Are you not eating the way you should because you want to change the way you look? There are many toxic things that doesn't have to do with your spirit, and your spirit will be able to tell. Your spirit will guide you. You can have a regular, normal diet and be breathing consciously. And you can even have a bad diet and be breathing consciously, setting an intention for the food and not eating emotionally, and you would still be fine. But there are certain things that you need to research and see and try out for yourself. What I'm saying here is stop doing things in autopilot. There's a lot more that I will be covering about this, but I just wanted to share this with you, because I know now that by stopping things you do by habit, when it comes to food and when it comes to certain activities, a lot of things, when you stop being in autopilot, you allow connection to your spirit guides, to yourself, and everything becomes effortless once you let go of the weight that you were carrying when it comes to the emotions stored in your body, the toxins in your body. And you have to be conscious of it. When you're aware, operating from love and not fear, you can change things gradually. And the more you connect with spirit, you can change in an instant, despite what's going on outside. It's just the frequency you operate from. Thank you so much for being here. If you resonate with this message, please, if you can, subscribe to the channel. Just give it a like. It really helps me grow with this channel and to also be creating more. I have a membership. If you want to join, that'd be awesome. I will be posting videos, guided meditations. Have a beautiful, beautiful, eternal present moment. I love you so much. and I see you in the next one.